Imagine opening an atlas of the world. You see vast continents, oceans, borders of nations, lines that seem eternal, stable, unchanging. But if you rewind time by a few centuries, it becomes clear. The world we live in is not the result of inevitable processes. It is the result of decisions made by specific individuals. A single voice, a single signature, a single order, once capable of changing the fate of entire nations. We are used to thinking of global history as a movement of masses, economies, technologies. But no matter how complex the system, sometimes one person becomes the lever that turns history in a completely different direction. Today, we will talk about 6 such people: Napoleon, Lenin, Churchill, Hitler, Mao, Roosevelt. 6 figures, 6 personalities, 6 eras, and 6 examples of how a leader can change the fate of a continent and sometimes the whole world. This is not a pantheon of great men. This is a story about how an enormous historical machine sometimes depends on the psychology, ambitions, fears, and decisions of a single individual, a leader who receives power and must choose where to lead his nation and with it the entire world. Let us begin with a figure who seems to have stepped out of an ancient myth, a man who grew up in the chaos of a revolution but became the symbol of a new empire: Napoleon Bonaparte. His influence on Europe is difficult to overstate, but what made him exceptional? Talent, ambition, luck, in truth, a rare combination of strategic intellect and personal willpower. Napoleon entered the political stage at a moment when France was torn between revolutionary chaos and attempts to restore order. He saw a country past to the point of compromise, a nation that needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. And Napoleon decided that he was the one who could do it. But he went further. He decided he could change not only France, but Europe itself. His legal code, his reforms, his administrative and educational systems, these outlived him. Even his enemies admitted that he was not merely conquering territory, he was conquering the future. Yet every conquest carries a choice, and Napoleon made choices that eventually led to wars costing millions of lives. The Russian campaign, his endless hunger for expansion, his desire to bend the continent to his will, all of these became examples of how the scale of a personality can turn into a scale of catastrophe. And still, the idea of Europe as a space of unified laws and strong centralized states is in many ways a legacy of his era. Our second figure is Vladimir Lenin. People still argue about him. Was he a genius, a criminal, a reformer, or a destroyer? But no one disputes that his decisions changed the world forever. By the early 20th century, the Russian Empire, vast, backwards, overflowing with contradictions, stood on the brink of collapse. But Lenin became the person who turned a systemic crisis into a revolution. His power lay in an idea so radical that it could not be ignored. Lenin did not merely use Marxism, he rewrote it for practical objectives. He understood that revolutions occur not when objective conditions mature, but when there are people willing to seize the moment. And Lenin seized it. One decree, the decree on peace; another, the decree on land; one decision to dissolve the Constituent Assembly, and an empire that had existed for centuries collapsed within months. But the consequences reached far beyond Russia. Communism became the ideology that defined the entire 20th century. A global struggle of systems began. Conflicts erupted across Asia, Europe, and Latin America, all of it a continuation of the decisions Lenin made from 1917 to 1922. This is an example of how a person armed with an idea can reshape the world. Our third figure is Winston Churchill, a man remembered as a symbol of resilience, character, and the ability to stand firm when everything is falling apart. To understand his influence, one must see the world as it was in 1940. Germany under Hitler had conquered nearly all of Europe. France had fallen. Poland was crushed. Scandinavia was occupied. and Britain stood alone, the last island of resistance. At this moment, Churchill delivered his famous words, "We shall never surrender." Not just words, a turning point in history, because Britain could have chosen another path, make peace with Hitler, preserve partial independence, retreat. But Churchill made a decision that seemed like madness, to continue fighting when all seemed lost. And that decision changed the fate of Europe. Had Britain fallen, the United States might not have entered the war in time. The resistance in Europe could have been crushed. Germany would have gained the resources and time needed to dominate the continent. Sometimes a leader's influence is not victory, it is refusal to collapse. But if Churchill is an example of a leader who saved a continent, then Adolf Hitler is the opposite, a leader who destroyed it. His impact on history is monstrous, destructive, tragic. But to understand how one personality can reshape a continent, we must see what Hitler did. He turned economic crisis and national humiliation into an ideology of hatred. He created a state built on the cult of force and destruction. He convinced millions that war was the path to greatness. He challenged the world and dragged Europe into its most devastating conflict. Hitler is an example of how a leader can use fear, propaganda, and emotion to build a system capable of destroying half the planet. His decisions, invading Poland, attacking the USSR, genocide, the Holocaust, were not inevitable. They were personal choices, and that is what makes him one of the most dangerous leaders in world history. Next is Mao Zedong, a leader whose influence reached not just a continent, but 1/5 of humanity. Mao is a unique example of charisma, ideology, and ruthlessness woven together. He brought the communists to power in China, a nation torn by civil wars and foreign invasions. He built a state that would later become the world's second largest economy. But his decisions also caused catastrophes: the Great Leap Forward, millions dead from famine; the Cultural Revolution, destruction of intellectual life; chaos, fear. Mao's ideas shaped China and much of East Asia for decades. And even today, many aspects of Chinese political culture trace back to him. Mao is an example of how a leader can create an ideology that outlives him. Our final figure is Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a man who changed the fate of the United States and through them, the fate of the world. Roosevelt came to power during the Great Depression. The country was broken, millions were unemployed, the economy paralyzed. He launched the New Deal, a program that revived the economy, created jobs, built infrastructure, and reformed finance. But his influence extended far beyond the US. Roosevelt shaped the coalition that won World War II. He created international institutions, the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, that still define global politics today. He understood that after the war, the world could not repeat the failures of Versailles. It had to be built on new principles, and his decisions truly reshaped the world. So what unites Napoleon, Lenin, Churchill, Hitler, Mao, and Roosevelt? What makes a leader capable of altering the fate of a continent? First, the moment. A leader emerges in crisis and seizes it. Second, the idea. Strong, simple, emotional. One that people want to believe or fear not to believe. Third, the will. The ability to make decisions when the consequences are unknown. And finally, the risk. Each of them challenged the system, some to save it, some to destroy it. But above all, the decisions of one person can change the world. History shows us one individual can raise an empire or bring it down, liberate a continent or plunge it into war, create a new ideology or destroy an old one. History is not only events, it is choices, choices made by people who hold power in their hands. And the question history asks us today is,